hard on yourself when you don't do what you say you're going to do, you might avoid setting this goal of writing every day because you know that on the days when you don't write, you're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't write today. Ugh, I was quote unquote bad by not writing today." Okay? So let's just dispel that. Let's just take a deep breath. The only way to achieve these big goals in your life is to get yourself to do these little activities that add up over time. And the best way that I have found to mentally frame the idea of doing those mental activities is to shoot for 70%. What? I don't have to be perfect? That's right. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this part 2 of episode 99 of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, starting now. Hi, Alegre here, trying again because apparently I was muted the first time. Not sure why. All of the settings looked right, but sometimes it just happens. So thank you to the person who let me know that I was muted. Welcome. I am so excited to be here. This is actually going to be the 99th episode of the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. I'm so excited. And next week is going to be, of course, episode 100, because 100 comes after 99. And I just want to give you a little preview of what 100 is going to be, because next week I'm going to have 3 of my frequent collaborators on this podcast, Natasha, Angela, and Christine. And we're going to talk about dreams and goal setting, because just this past weekend I had a dream of mine come true, and it was something that I've been working towards for the last 2.5 years. So I'm going to talk with Natasha about the process of getting there. And then my friends, they're going to tell me about a goal or dream that they want to work on. And I'm going to coach them through the steps they should take, what action they should take in order to work towards that goal. So I'm very excited. Episode number 100. Hope you can join me for that. I'm Alegre. I am the brain behind Beyond Your Wildest Dreams and this podcast, the Harness the Power of Planning podcast. And I am all about giving you the brain science backed tools you need to prioritize yourself and to prioritize your goals. Okay, so topic 2, the 70% rule for success. So whenever I'm helping someone come up with a plan for a goal that they want to achieve, something that they're working towards, the point of coming up with the plan is to back into all of the steps that are required in order to achieve that goal. So let's just take a really simple one, which it's a simple one that a lot of people have, which is to write a book. A lot of people want to write a book. And this is not just people like me who write nonfiction books. A lot of people want to write a fiction book. So let's have as the goal getting the book published, because most people want to write a book not just to write it, but they want to publish it. So that's the goal. That's kind of the finish line. Obviously, there's still a lot you have to do after you publish a book, but the finish line, let's say, is publishing the book. There are so many steps before that. There's a whole marathon before that finish line. And before you publish the book, obviously you have to, figure out how you're going to publish it. Are you going to self-publish it? Are you going to be looking for an agent and an editor? And then, before you get to that point, you have to have a really, really good, solid final product. And before you have the final product, you have edited it and re-edited it multiple times, probably. I know I do at least 3 to 5 times. And before that, you have to find an editor, because it's not just about reading and editing the book yourself. Having outside eyes on it is so, so helpful. And before that, you have to have a rough draft. And before you have the rough draft, you have to be writing regularly. And really, that's kind of those are kind of the simplest ways of thinking about all the steps to get to publishing a book. But the real activity you need to focus on if you want to write a book is the daily writing. Because only when you write regularly, and you don't have to write every single day, but you have to write most days if you want to get a 300-page book together. And if you want to get a shorter book, you still want to write most days, but maybe you take some months off. Like, for instance, I wrote these 4 books, and each of these books is about 80 pages. So altogether, they're about 300 and something pages. I wrote these 4 books by writing almost every day for roughly a year and a half period. Okay, so again, about 300 something pages, like the size of kind of a normal novel. So, but I haven't written anything since then. However, I did start writing a new book uh, just a couple weeks ago. I'm up to about 50 pages, and I am writing almost every day. So, getting to that daily activity is what's really important and what's often missing in most people's goal setting journey. People set a goal for themselves, but they don't ever back into all the steps that they have to accomplish and then the little step that moves things forward every day. So, let me just give you another example. My creative outlet of choice, I mean, I love doing this. I love writing my nonfiction books, but I also love to do stand up comedy. I don't know why. I just do. I've always enjoyed stand-up comedy, and I do perform, and pretty much every day I'm working on at least one joke. I kind of can't stop thinking about it because I just enjoy it so much. And so I would say, for a comedian, that's the daily activity. Again, it's a form of writing. It's different than writing a book, writing a joke because, they're smaller. But it's the same sort of idea. Like, every day I am working on some sort of joke, and I have some jokes that I've been working on for a couple of years because they're so hard to figure out how to make them just right. Like, there's something there, but how do I get to that nugget? So sometimes you're polishing and polishing and polishing forever. So anyway, helping people figure out what is that daily activity you need to get to. Okay, now you have the daily activity, writing. Okay, writing every day is not only, I would say, not realistic, but I would say that it's counterproductive. Because, for instance, if you're the personality type who is hard on yourself when you don't do what you say you're going to do, you might avoid setting this goal of writing every day because you know that on the days when you don't write, you're going to be like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't write today. Ugh, I was quote unquote bad by not writing today." Okay, so let's just dispel that. Let's just take a deep breath. The only way to achieve these big goals in your life is to get yourself to do these little activities that add up over time. And the best way that I have found to mentally frame the idea of doing those mental activities is to shoot for 70%. Okay, so if I say that I'm going to write 4 or 5 days a week, and I do that 70% of the time, then I consider that success. So let's say I set a goal for 5 days a week, but I only write 4. The next week I write 3. The next week I write 5. The next week I write 3. It evens out to where I'm hitting 70% of that 5-day-a-week goal. Then I consider that a win. Literally, I consider that success. I don't say like, "Oh, I did pretty good." No. The goal is always kind of like a little bit of a stretch. Success comes with getting to at least 70% of that. So when people are setting goals, I always say to you, do not say you're going to do something every day. I mean, there are very few things I do every day. I can only think of one off the top of my head that I do every day, which is make my bed. And it's because I just love the look of a made bed. I always make my bed. Yes, I take my supplements almost every day, but there are days I miss, and you know what? That's just what happens. My skincare, I also do almost every day, but that's just because I love it. I just love it that much. Lemon water, I don't even track it anymore. I do it more days than not. So I would say never say to yourself, I'm going to do something every single day of the week, because it's just setting you up for failure. Because then 70% means you have to do it, at least 5 times a week. And that's just a lot of pressure. So I always say to tell people, like, if you're starting a new habit, you're starting to develop a new habit, shoot for 4 times a week. Because 4 times a week is you're doing it more often than you're not doing it, right? If there's 7 days in a week, 4 days a week means you're doing it more often than you're not. And if you're hitting 70% of that, some weeks you're going to get 4 days, some weeks you might only get 3. But the goal is 70%. And 70% is such a wonderful number because, one, it is sustainable. As I said, to write these 4 books here, I had to write most days of the week for about a year and a half. If I had said, oh my gosh, I'm not hitting 7 days a week, I would have stopped doing it a lot sooner because it would have been so painful. I would have just chucked the idea out the window. But by adhering to this idea of 70% as success, it's doable. You're not going to be self-flagellating because, oh, I didn't hit 100%. I find the older I get, the more I realize just how much of life is figuring out how to trick your brain. Because the reality is our modern life is very different from the 10,000 years of evolution that created the human brain. And we now have so many things to stress about that this brain was not designed to stress about. Like, this brain was just designed to stress about there's not enough food and I'm in physical danger. That's really what this brain was designed for. I was an anthropology student. That's what my degree is in. So I think a lot about how we were designed. Okay. The modern stresses of being hard on ourselves because we're not reaching our goals, this brain is just not designed to deal with that. And so that's why I feel like you have to figure out the tips that work for you to trick your brain into not feeling so strung out over these abstract goals of things like, writing a book. So create a goal for yourself. Figure out what the daily activity is that you need to do to support that goal, and then work towards achieving that daily activity 70% of the time, and you will have success. 70% is actually a lot of activity in the long run. You're doing so much more than 0, right? Because that's the thing, is a lot of people are like, well, if I can't do it right, I'm not going to do it at all. Okay, well, the difference between doing 0 activity and 70% activity is huge. That's a huge difference. And it's sustainable. Okay, it's funny because I actually do the app, the language app Duolingo. And one of the things I dislike about Duolingo is how it pressures you to do it every day. And I still adhere to the 70%, even though Duolingo wants me to be on there every day. That just doesn't work for me. I just don't like that kind of pressure. Thank you for joining me today. I know it was later than usual because of the audio issue that happened, but I hope you found this helpful. If you are interested in taking your planning journey to the next level, I do have an on-demand 6-session course that you can access at tinyurl.com/HPOP on demand. So there's the QR code if you want to take the Harness the Power of Planning workshop. It breaks it down into 6 sessions, this concept and skill of life design and planning for a life beyond your wildest dreams. And be sure to check in for next week's episode, number 100. I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. And if you are listening to the Harness the Power of Planning podcast, be sure to subscribe and give me a rating or a review wherever you listen. I really appreciate it. And remember, planning makes everything easier.